It has been a while since my last Pokemon Challenge run, and Pokemon Red with only normal types, the last one I did, was really a lot of fun, so let's try one like it. But I'm getting tired of Gen 1, so let's jump over to Gen 3. Still in Kanto though. Today we figure out, can I beat Pokemon Fire Red with only poison types? Poison prior to Gen 6, especially in Kanto, is probably the weirdest type in the game. It's absolutely everywhere, especially in Kanto, where every single grass type besides Tangela, the Execute line, and the Paris line is also poison. But it's only good against grass. On top of that, it is resisted by 4 different types. Admittedly, it does have 4 resistances itself, but Steel is also immune to it. Do you see how bad this type is? Also, though, it is freaking everywhere. As I said, almost every single grass type in the game is poison, plus all 3 ghosts are poison, plus a decent number of pure poison types. I just checked it, and there are 34 poison types in Kanto. That is insane. With 150 Pokemon catchable in the Dex, 22% of them are poison type. By the way, I'm writing my notes for this as I go through with the challenge, which means this part is written beforehand, so let me know if you think I can win or not. I think I can probably win, but coverage will probably be very bad, considering how many poison types are also grass type. Anyway, the rules for this challenge are really simple. I can only use poison types in battle. I will need other Pokemon to use HMs, but I cannot use those Pokemon in battle. No glitches or exploits, since this isn't a Gen 1 run, there aren't any fun ones I can abuse. Well, I will use the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to make trade evolutions by level up instead, purely so that I can use Gengar, but I don't consider that to be an exploit. No items in battle, but held items and items outside of battle are allowed. Now, if you like this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more, and do whatever else YouTubers tell you to do. I don't really know. Right off the bat, I use the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to make trade evolutions level instead. Bulbasaur is poison type though, so I don't need to do any Pokemon switching. I named my Bulbasaur Bulbasnore because I couldn't think of anything better. Since I don't feel like putting freaking Beedrill on my team, I won't get any new team members until after Brock, so now it's Brock time. I tried Brock at level 12. To the surprise of hopefully no one, he was a complete and utter pushover. His Geodude was an easy down with 1 Vine Whip. I was a level below his Onix, so I set up Leech Seed, but this wasn't necessary. He went down to 1 Vine Whip as well. I moved on to Route 3 and caught my next team member, a Nidoran male that I named Fonz, after the member of the Twitch Plays Pokemon team. While this was happening, Bulbasaur evolved into Ivysaur, but I forgot to record it. In Mountain Moon, I catch my 3rd team member, at least for now, a Zubat that I name Bruce, because of Bruce Wayne Batman! Along the way, I took the Helix Fossil. I knew if I didn't say what I took, you'd all ask. Actually, now that I think about it, everyone ask anyway. Comments are good for the YouTube algorithm. With Bulbasaur at level 20, Fonz at level 14, and Bruce at level 7, I challenged Misty. She was, unsurprisingly, a total pushover. I beat her Staryu with 1 Bullet Seed, but I did get pretty lucky for that. If it had hit 1 less time, I would have needed to try again. So instead, her Starmie, I started by setting up 1 Leech Seed and Poison Powder before going in for the Bullet Seed. Because of this, I won that turn. The rival battle on Nugget Bridge was annoying. I set up Poison and Leech Seed on his Pidgeotto right away, but I didn't know that Leech Seed stuck around when you left, so I didn't switch out. This ended up being a huge mistake, though, because Pidgeotto took down Ivysaur. I brought in Fonz, who right away I set up Focus Energy on. I tried to set up more, but I didn't know that it could only be used once, so I wasted a couple turns. We traded more punches for a while before Charmander with Metal Claw took me down. Unsurprisingly, my level 7 Zubat could not do much. I did some grinding and came back with Ivysaur and Fonz at level 22 and Bruce at level 12 because Deer Helix Zubat is so bad. While I was grinding, Fonz evolved into Nidorino, so right away I used a Moonstone to evolve it into Nidoking. I was, unsurprisingly, completely overleveled. Fonz beat his Pidgeotto with 2 Thrashes, but to stop him from getting confused, I switched out to Ivysaur for his Abra, who went down easily with a couple Razor Leaves. Blue brought in Charmander, so I switched back out to Fonz. Fonz took out Charmander with 2 Thrashes and his Rattata with 1. SSN rival time. I led with Bruce by accident because I'd been switch training him on the SSN trainers, so I wasted a turn switching to Fonz. Then, I took out his Pidgeotto with 2 Thrashes. He brought out Kadabra, and in order to avoid Fonz getting confused, I brought out Ivysaur. I've been playing a lot of Gen 1 runs lately, so I forgot that in Gen 3, Kadabra's special defense is just as bad as its physical, so I started by poisoning it. That ended up being unnecessary, though, and I OHKO'd with Razor Leaf. He brought out Charmeleon, so I switched back to Fonz. Fonz took out Charmeleon with 1 Water Pulse, and his Raticate with 1 Thrash. Search time. His Voltorb was an easy OHKO with Dig, but his Pikachu caused some difficulty. Fonz had been paralyzed earlier, so that, combined with Pikachu double-teaming, was a pain. At a certain point I switched out to Ivysaur, but he got paralyzed right away. I tried to poison him, but when I eventually did, Surge just used a freaking full heal! Ivysaur went down, so I brought out Fonz again. I eventually took out Pikachu, and then his Raichu went down easily to 1 Dig. On my way to the next gym, Bruce evolved into Golbat. Unfortunately, I can't evolve it into Crobat until the post-game, which I'm not gonna do, so we're stuck with Golbat. This isn't Gen 1, so I can't use the Pokédoll for Ghost Marowak, so I actually work my way through the Rocket Hideout this time. Because of that, I have to fight Giovanni now. His Onix was an OHKO with Water Pulse from Fonz. For his Rhydon, I switched out to Ivysaur so I could get some levels. It was an OHKO with Razor Leaf. I switched out to Bruce for Kangaskhan for the same reason. But that ended up being a mistake, though, because Kangaskhan OHKO'd him. I switched out to Fonz, but Fonz went down, and then the same happened to Ivysaur. The second try went much better. I led with Fonz again, but I didn't switch, so I OHKO'd both of his Pokemon that are actually his type specialty with Water Pulse. Then he brought out Kangaskhan, so I used Thrash. I got the full 3 hits in, but then I got confused with it on like 1 HP, so I used Poison Sting. I was confused, so I had to make sure I used a weak move so that if I hurt myself, I didn't take much damage. Thankfully, though, I didn't hit myself, and I got through. Now we pop into the Pokemon Tower and fight the rival again. I had Ivysaur in front by accident, so I decided to make the most of it and poison his Pidgeotto with Poison Powder, before switching to Fonz to take care of him with 1 Thrash. He brought in Execute, but Fonz is extremely good, so I decided to keep him in using Thrash. Unfortunately, though, Thrash didn't OHKO, and only lasted for 2. I used Poison Sting, but Fonz hurt himself in confusion. Then, Execute used Hypnosis, putting me to sleep. I brought in Ivysaur, but it used Confusion, and then Razor Leaf missed, and Ivysaur went down to another Confusion. I brought in Bruce, who took him down with 1 Aerial Ace. Why didn't I just do that from the start? He brought out Kadabra, who was an easy OHKO with Aerial Ace. Next is Water Onix, and I spammed Aerial Ace while I used Thrash. Luckily, Thrash only went twice before he got confused. 2 Aerial Aces from me, plus him hitting himself in the face once, and Water Onix was down. Last is Charmeleon, and I did a little bit with Bruce before he went down. I brought in Fonz, but since he was asleep, it took a while. Thankfully, he woke up when there was a little bit left, and I took down Blue with 1 Water Pulse. I'm not using a gimmick this time, so I don't need to talk about Ghost Marowak. After settling Marowak's soul, I catch my next team member, a Ghastly that I named Poison Guy after the Ghastly I used in my second ever challenge run. Can I beat Pokemon Fire Red with only a Ghastly? Poison Guy and Bruce are significantly lower levels than Ivysaur and Fonz, so I trained Bruce up to 30 and Poison Guy up to 25, which coincidentally happens to be the level that Poison Guy evolves. Definitely a coincidence. However, it just so happened that while I was grinding, Ivysaur evolved into Venusaur. That's fun. Even though I'm able to go into Silph and then go to Sabrina, I'm not gonna. I'm instead gonna go to Koga. So, it's Koga time! While I was battling Koga's gym trainers, Bruce evolved into Crobat, which I didn't think was possible until I beat the game and got the Nat Dex. My guess is that it was a weird thing that the emulator changed, but I ain't complaining. I love Crobat, and I don't like Golbat. I do have the Universal Pokemon Randomizer's Change Impossible Evos setting to True, but I thought that was just for trade evolutions, not for National Dex only evolutions. Now, it's really Koga time! I led with Fonz against his coughing, and used Dig, only to forget that this ain't Gen 1! Coughing is Levitate now! The next turn I used Thrash, which did an annoyingly low amount of damage for a move that is that strong. The next turn of Thrash he went down, but I didn't switch when he brought in Muck in case I could go another turn. I could not, however, and I switched to Bruce. We traded hits for a couple turns before I switched back to Fonz. I used Dig, but Muck had raised his defense so high it barely did anything. We kept going back and forth like this until I used a Hyper Potion. I kept attacking, but he had used a disgusting amount of minimizes, so it rarely hit. Koga is infuriating, even when he can't Toxic Stall you. I used Thrash, and while it did hit, it did not do very much. We kept trading blows until I switched out to Bruce, who knows Aerial Ace, a perfect accuracy, flying-type move. Unfortunately, though, Crobat is not very defensive, and 7 levels below Muck, Bruce went down pretty fast. Brought in Venusaur, who immediately used Sleep Powder, and then tried to hit Koga with his own infuriating chip damage strategy using Leech Seed. Koga used a Hyper Potion at some point, but Mug stayed asleep for a really long time before eventually waking up, but still going down to Leech Seed. Also, it didn't hurt that Razor Leaf is special, and thus not affected by Mug's acid armor. Out comes his second Coughing, who has set up the same strategy on before he can use all his gimmicky evasion boost strategies. Or at least he tried to, but he used a full heal to get rid of the sleep right away. I did put him to sleep a couple of turns later, though, and brought him down quickly. A welcome relief from the agony that was Muck. Out comes Wheezing, and I set up against him right away again. He's 9 levels above me, so I knew it was my only chance. I got him really close to going down. He was on like 1 HP, but then he brought down Venusaur. Thankfully, though, I could just bring in Fonz and deal with him. Along the way to Blaine, I catch my next team member, a Tentacool I named Squidward. I did a little grinding because I was extremely underleveled for Koga, and while I was grinding, Squidward evolved into Tentacruel. That's fun. Blaine time. I accidentally led with Poison Guy because I'd been switch training him, but I immediately switched to Squidward. I OHKO'd his first 2 with Surf, but then his Rapidash was a pain. I got him down to Red, he used Bounce. I was faster, so I did nothing that turn. He used a Hyper Potion. It just kept going like this. Kept getting him into Red, but then he kept using a potion, until at a certain point, he just didn't use a potion for some reason, and I beat his Rapidash. Out comes Arcanine, and I used Surf, but then he brings me down with Takedown. I brought in Fonz to finish the job, and I beat him and got the badge. Rival Fivel-Timel. Fivel-Timel? That's staying in. I led with Fonz to deal with Pidgeot, having taught him Shockwave upon realizing that with my planned team, I had nothing for flying types. It was an easy OHKO, and he brought out Execute. I switched to Bruce to deal with Execute, and used Air Cutter, because while the accuracy isn't perfect, the high power and boosted crit chance made it feel like a good idea, because Execute was a high level, and Crobat, cool as it is, ain't really that strong. It was a 2-hit KO, but along the way Bruce got paralyzed. Out comes Alakazam, and while logically I should have switched to Poison Guy, I didn't, so that I could set up Toxic. Toxic missed the first turn, so it took until the second turn to get it, and that ended up being completely unnecessary because I OHKO'd with Air Cutter anyway. Water Onix is next, and once again before switching I set up Toxic. Then, I switched out to Fonz immediately, so I could deal with him without having to worry about how strong Water Onix is. It was an OHKO. Last is Charizard, and I switched out to Squidward for obvious reasons. Giovanni time. I accidentally led with Fonz, but I switched out to Squidward right away, who could take out his first Pokemon with a couple of Surfs. Next is Kangaskhan. Why does he have a Kangaskhan when he is the ground leader? I will never know. I switched to Poison Guy and used Curse. He can't touch me, and while I can't touch him either, I can bring him down with Curse. I did just that, and out comes Rhyhorn. I bring out Venusaur literally just because I wanted to use it more than Squidward. I tried to OHKO with Razor Leaf, but I'd swapped its position in the move list with Sleep Powder, and then forgot that I'd done that, so I used Sleep Powder instead. Then, I took it down with Razor Leaf. Last is Nidoqueen, and I, forgetting Nidoqueen is part poison, stayed in. When I realized that, I set up Sleep Seed and then switched out to Poison Guy. Those of you that watched my Fire Red Ghastly Only video know exactly where this is going. I used Dream Eater. Didn't OHKO though, so I used it again, but Nidoqueen woke up, and I had to use Shadow Claw the next turn. Regardless, Giovanni is down. I should have probably switched to someone like Squidward, who was better equipped to deal with Nidoqueen, but I really wanted to get to use Dream Eater at least once. Monotype runs like this are more about just having fun than mono Pokemon runs, so if there's something I can do that's really strong, and something else I can do that's not as strong, but is a lot more fun, I'm always gonna pick the more fun option. Next up, Psychic Leader Sabrina. I led with Poison Guy, expecting this to be easy. It was not. First out was Kadabra, who I was surprisingly able to OHKO, but not before it set up a Future Sight. Out next is Mr. Mime, who I expected to also OHKO. I did not. I did about half of its health, and then it OHKO'd me! Oh yeah. Poison is weak to Psychic. Crab Cakes, kinda forgot about that. I brought out Fonz, hoping to capitalize on Psychic-type's low physical defense. I did just that for her Mr. Mime. Out comes Alakazam, however, and Fonz is no match for a Future Sight attack and a Stab Super effective Psychic from Alakazam. I decided to bring out Bruce, because even though his stats are lackluster, being able to use Toxic will be really helpful for the chip damage. Unfortunately, though, Toxic has low accuracy and missed on the one turn that I had. Bruce! Dude! You had one job! I brought out Squidward, who tanked a Psychic and fired back with a Surf. Unfortunately, though, he couldn't take another Surf, and he went down. Last I brought in Venusaur, and immediately I set up Sleep Seed. I knew my only chance was to make him unable to attack me, so I was really glad Sleep Powder hit. She used a full heal the next turn, but that didn't take away from the fact that that was 2 turns she couldn't attack, since I was reasonably sure that if she did, it would OHKO. Sleep Powder did miss the next turn, but for some reason she used Recover instead of Psychic. I ain't complaining. The next turn Sleep Powder actually hit, and one Razor Leaf later, Alakazam was down. Out comes Venomoth, and with Razor Leaf being not very effective, I knew chip damage with Sleep Seed was the only way I could win, so I set that up right away. I got her into yellow health, but she woke up and confused me. I hit myself trying to put her back to sleep, and she used Psybeam. The next turn I didn't hit myself, but I did miss. Despite not putting her to sleep, I got her into red health. Problem is, she just used a Hyper Potion. I eventually snapped out of confusion and put her back to sleep. We kept going like this until eventually I got just the right rolls with Razor Leaf and Leech Seed that I won. After the gym, I did a little training in the fighting dojo to get Poison Guy to catch up with the rest of the team, and Poison Guy evolved. Admittedly, I don't like Gengar nearly as much as I like Haunter, but I am glad it's stronger. Now, it's Erica time! I led with Bruce because he can do super effective stab flying damage, and used Aerial Ace to sweep her team. I anticipated that. What I did not anticipate was quite how easy it would be. Kanto has a weird quirk that no other regions have, that you can actually beat Surge, Erica, Koga, Sabrina, and Blaine in any order you want, under the condition that you beat Koga before Blaine. Because of that, my team was leveled for beating Blaine, the 7th gym leader, while I was beating Erica, the 4th gym leader. Needless to say, this fight was pretty easy. Now finally, it's time for the last leader, Giovanni, the ground-type gym leader of Viridian City. I led with Poison Guy against Rhyhorn, and took him out with one Surf. He brought out Dugtrio, and once again, I OHKO'd with Surf. Next up was another Rhyhorn, and it was yet again an OHKO, but considering it was 9 levels above me, I think it's safe to say that I only did so because of a crit. Out comes Nidoqueen, and one Surf only brought it down to a little below half health. Then, this Nidoqueen OHKO'd with Earthquake. I decided that the best idea here was actually to switch in Poison Guy, because while it can't do much, it has Levitate in Gen 3, and that will be vital in order to win this. A few Nightshades got him low, but he used a Hyper Potion. That made me realize that if he was going to use a Hyper Potion every time I got him low, I needed to be able to damage him more than once per turn. So I used Curse, laying a curse on him, essentially giving him a perish count. AI never switches, and Curse is volatile, so he can't get rid of it with a full heal. A few turns later, he was down. Hey, so while I was editing this, I realized that I completely forgot to talk about the fight with Nidoking. So that's what we're gonna do now, real quick. So sorry about the awkward cut. Last is Nidoking, and I decided the best course of action was to keep Poison Guy in and lay another curse. I did just that, and followed it up by bringing in Fonz and OHKOing with Surf. I doubt I actually needed to use the curse, but this is not a Nuzlocke. I don't really care about that. Giovanni is down. Time for the Viridian City rival battle. I led with Fonz to take care of Pidgeot. But after 2 shockwaves, it still lived. This does not bode well for my chances at the Elite Four. Thankfully, though, it used a physical move and got poisoned by Fonz's Poison Point ability, and the poison brought it down. Next is Alakazam, and I switched out to Poison Guy to deal with him. I did some damage with Shadow Claw on the first turn because he used Future Sight, but the next turn, Poison Guy went down. I brought in Fonz to capitalize on Alakazam's low defense, but because of Fonz's low speed, he went down before getting to do anything. Next, I brought in Venusaur, hoping to set up Sleep Seed. Unfortunately, though, the Future Sight attack, combined with Alakazam using Psychic before I got a chance to move, completely decimated Venusaur. I brought in Bruce, hoping to do some damage with Air Cutter, and maybe take it down with Bruce's high speed. And I did just that. Finally, I beat Alakazam. 2 down, 4 to go. Next is Rhyhorn, and I switched out to Squidward to deal with him. It was an OHKO with Surf. Execute time, and I switched out to Bruce to deal with him. I got him down to yellow with Air Cutter, but then he paralyzed me, and I was fully paralyzed, and he took in Sunlight. He shot off Solar Beam, but despite how powerful it is, it's a not very effective move, and did not do much, so I used Air Cutter and won. Water Onix is out, and I brought out Squidward, because it can do stab damage. I used Barrier because I thought he knew Thrash, and assumed he would use that, because logically he shouldn't use a water move, because it'll be not very effective. Boy, was I wrong. He started with Rain Dance, making my water moves more powerful, but also making his more powerful. I used Surf, he used Hydro Pump. Neither move did much, even under rain, and we kept going like this until at a certain point I decided to use Acid. It didn't really change anything. All you need to know is that eventually I won. Last is Charizard, and he used Wing Attack, which did more than I was comfortable with, but thankfully didn't win. Then on my turn, I used Surf and crit O-Code. In Victory Road, I catch my next and final team member, and Arbok I name Wormy Boy. Okay, so here's the team that I'm going to use for the rest of the game, which is literally just the league. Venusaur the Venusaur, Fonz the Nidoking, Bruce the Crobat, Poison Guy the Gengar, Squidward the Tentacruel, and Wormy Boy the Arbok. Elite Four time. First up, Ice Trainer Lorelei. Most of her Pokemon are water types, so I led with Venusaur. I started with Razor Leaf, which disturbingly did less than half, so I decided setting up Poison and Leech Seed would be the best course of action. Annoyingly, though, Poison Powder missed, and I had to set up just Leech Seed before she brought me down. I brought in Poison Guy, having taught it Brick Break, but that didn't do very much. It did something, though, and Poison Guy isn't weak to any of Dewgong's moves, so I kept it in. Annoyingly, though, I got her to extremely low health, and she, of course, used a Full Restore. Brick Break still wasn't doing much, so I switched to using Giga Drain, which I'd also taught it, and that did most of its health, and then Leech Seed did the rest. Next is Slowbro, and I switched out to Fonz, who knows Shockwave. But it didn't do much, so I switched back to Poison Guy, who could do super effective stab ghost-type damage. Unfortunately, though, I wasn't able to do much, and then Poison Guy went down. I brought out Bruce, who used Aerial Ace and took out Slowbro. Out comes Jinx, and I decided the best course of action was to use Toxic. Annoyingly, though, Toxic missed, and then I was swiftly proven right because Jinx O-Code Bruce. Next I brought out Wormy Boy, and he used Bite, but then Jinx used Lovely Kiss and put Wormy Boy to sleep. He did wake up, but by then he was on half health from Ice Punch and went down the next turn. I brought in Fonz and used Dig, figuring that with how low his health was, I'd only get to use one move, so I used Dig, which is Stab, and the strongest move in my arsenal. I was right, and Dig did all of Jinx's remaining health. Next is Cloyster, and I decided to stop being risky and switch out to Squidward. I used Acid for a while before deciding to instead use Surf when I remembered how much stronger it is, despite being not very effective. Annoyingly, though, I'd gotten Cloyster to really low health, and she used a Full Restore. I got her to a little above half health when she withdrew Cloyster and switched out to Lapras. Lapras, annoyingly, had Water Absorb, so she made my strongest moves completely and utterly useless. I did maybe a quarter of her health before she finished off Squidward. Cloyster had set up Spikes, so that was the end, since Fonz was on such low health that Spikes did enough to finish him. I came back with everyone other than Wormy Boy at least level 60, leading with Fonz this time. I took out Dewgong with a couple Thunderbolts, but then I switched out to Venusaur for Cloyster so I could set up chip damage. Cloyster's strategy is just to protect and bolster defense and stall you out with Hail, so I knew the best course of action would be to set up Poison Powder and Leech Seed on the turns that she doesn't use Protect. I started with Sleep Powder because using Poison to do increased chip damage hadn't occurred to me yet, but it missed, so on the next, third because of Protect, turn, I used Leech Seed. Eventually I got in Poison Powder, at which point I switched to using Razor Leaf until she went down. Slowbro was next, and I decided the best course of action would be to use chip damage again. I started with Leech Seed this time, but it somehow missed. I didn't think that was possible, and I had to wait until the next turn to seed it. That same turn, however, Slowbro used Ice Beam, which did some damage and froze me. Thankfully, this isn't Gen 1 where Freeze was insanely overpowered, but it's still annoyingly powerful. One more Ice Beam got Venusaur to really low health, so I switched out to Poison Guy, who could do super effective ghost damage. I used Shadow Ball to take him out in one hit. Lapras is next, and I decided to bring out Fonz to do super effective damage with Thunderbolt. I did just that, and got her down to about half health and paralyzed. Annoyingly, though, Lapras ate a citrus berry and got out of KO range, but she did KO me with Ice Beam. I brought out Squidward to use Acid because that wouldn't do much, but would do enough to KO. Annoyingly, though, she, of course, used a full restore, getting rid of not only her low health, but also her paralysis. Darn it! She paralyzed me with Body Slam, and I lost my next turn, and almost the turn after that, because she got me down to low health, but thankfully I did get in one more hit before Squidward went down. I brought in Poison Guy, who used Brick Break and took down Lapras. Last is Jinx, and I stayed in to use super effective stab ghost damage. I did just that in O-Code with Shadow Ball. Next is Fighting Trainer Bruno. He leads with Onyx, so I meant to lead with Venusaur, but I forgot and led with Fonz instead. Thankfully, though, Fonz could still OHKO with Surf. Next, another Onyx, so I switched out to Venusaur this time because, well, really just because I wanted to. Razor Leaf isn't as strong as Surf, even with the stab boost, but I just wanted to. What do you want? This run isn't super hard, I just want to have some fun. Thankfully, Razor Leaf OHKO'd anyway. He brought out Hitmonchan this time, and I switched to Bruce to do some super effective stab flying damage. It OHKO'd. Champ time, and I kept Bruce in hoping to OHKO again. I did not. I did a little more than half his health, and he used Rock Tomb, which really scared me, but thankfully did not do very much. One more Aerial Ace and Machamp is down. Last is Hitmonlee, and it was, unsurprisingly, another OHKO. That was a welcome breather from what happened in Lorelai's room. Next up is Ghost Trainer Agatha, and since only 3 of her Pokemon are ghosts, but all of them are poison types, if this were Gen 1, I would lead with Fonz to dig them all into oblivion. But annoyingly, this is not Gen 1, and her Pokemon have abilities, namely Levitate, and I can't hit them with ground moves. Because of that, I led with Poison Guy, because he is my only way of doing super effective damage to these people. She led with Gengar, and I OHKO'd with Shadow Ball. Her next is Golbat, and I switched to Fonz, who used Thunderbolt, which almost OHKO'd her, but didn't quite, and she used a full restore. I used another Thunderbolt, which yet again almost OHKO'd, but didn't. The next turn I used Surf, expecting her to heal, but she didn't, and I finished off Golbat. She brought out Haunter next, and I switched back to Poison Guy, who could do an easy OHKO with Shadow Ball. Arbok now, and I brought out Fonz, who could use Dig. Dig got it below half, but didn't KO. Thankfully, though, it also didn't get her into full restore range, and I took her out the next turn. Last is her next Gengar, and I brought out Poison Guy, hoping to OHKO with Shadow Ball. I did not, and she used Shadow Ball on me, doing enough to scare me, but not to do any real serious harm. She ate a berry, so I thought that would get her out of full restore range, but it didn't, so I hoped for a higher roll on the damage next turn. I got it, and I beat her. Finally, we're almost at the end. Dragon Master Lance. Or should I say, Bird Keeper Lance. I meant to lead with Fonz, but I forgot to switch my party after Agatha and still led with Poison Guy instead, and had to waste a turn switching to Fonz. Thankfully, though, it was still an OHKO anyway. Aerodactyl is next, and I switched to Fonz hoping to OHKO with Thunderbolt. I did not, but I did get him into KO range with Surf the next turn. On to his Dragonite, I decided the best course of action is to bring out Bruce so I could Toxic him. I did just that, but then I set up Double Team, and he OHKO'd with Outrage. Brought out Venusaur so I could set up Leech Seed. I did just that. Annoyingly, though, he used a full restore, getting rid of not only the damage, but also the Toxic Bruce had worked so hard to set up. I tried to set up Poison Powder, but I couldn't, because he set up Safeguard, and apparently I forgot what that did. I did a little damage, but eventually he took me down with Hyper Beam. I brought in Poison Guy, whose Shadow Ball didn't do much, but it did enough to take him down in 2. Out next is Dragonair, so I brought in Wormy Boy, who knows Earthquake, and hoped I'd be able to do something. It did quite a lot, in fact, and got Dragonair down to low health in 2 turns. Annoyingly, though, Lance used a full restore, getting rid of all that damage I did. Thankfully, though, he didn't heal the next time I got him that low, and I beat him. Last is Dragonair, and I did some damage with Earthquake, but then Dragonair used Hyper Beam and took down Wormy Boy. Brought in Poison Guy to finish the job with a crit Shadow Ball. We're finally at the end. Champion Blue. I led with Fonz against Pidgeot and OHKO'd with Thunderbolt. He brought out Alakazam, and I switched to Poison Guy to do some damage with Shadow Ball. I did just that, and OHKO'd with said Shadow Ball. Water Onix is next, and I switched to Fonz to do some damage and hopefully OHKO with Thunderbolt. I did not. That's because I accidentally used Surf instead of Thunderbolt, and took almost half my health and damage from a single Hydro Pump in return. The next turn, though, I wasn't an idiot, and I used Thunderbolt to OHKO. Out comes Rhydon, and I brought out Venusaur and OHKO'd with Razor Leaf. Charizard time, and I switched to Squidward to OHKO with Surf. I did not. I only did about half his health, but he barely did any of mine, and I finished him off the next turn. Last is Execute, for some reason, and I brought out Bruce hoping to OHKO with Aerial Ace. I did not, however, and he put me to sleep. I eventually woke up and finished him off, but that was frustrating. Not gonna lie though, this fight was a lot of fun. I think I actually laughed out loud at a couple of points. This run was a ton of fun. All the wacky goings on when you realize that despite how plentiful they are, poison types really don't have much variety when it comes to types. Makes it a challenge to set up a good team. If you want to get into doing Pokemon Challenge runs, but don't really know what to do, Water type run is a great way to start. Sorry this video took a while to get out. I took about a week off because I wasn't feeling motivated to make videos. Anyway, thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. This has been fun, but Absol and the Lumians are signing off. Peace out, y'all!